Welcome to Cigna's Pathway to Vitality event. We will begin with a brief video.
There's an energy that lives inside all of us. The more we feed it, the more it fuels us. It helps us bring our best selves to the world every day. What is it? Vitality. No matter what age you are or what shape you're in, no matter where you're from or what you do, you can feel the power of vitality. All you need to do is tap into it. To find out how, we partnered with Dr. Richard Ryan, the world's leading expert on the science of vitality. Together, we created something groundbreaking, the Evernorth Vitality Index. Turns out, vitality isn't just an energy that can be felt. It's also one that can be analyzed and measured. In a study with over 10,000 participants, we made an interesting discovery. People with high vitality are physically stronger, mentally healthier, and have greater job satisfaction. But here's where it gets even better. Those with low vitality can get there too. By taking small, consistent actions, vitality levels can increase over time, which means healthier and happier lives, homes, workplaces, and communities for everyone. That's what makes this so big. We can now quantify the unquantifiable, so both people and businesses can get the most out of it. And we're not stopping there. Let's go further. Let's dig deeper. Let's tap into vitality together.
And now we have Katya Andresen, Cigna's Chief Digital and Analytics Officer. In this position, Katya leads the digital strategy for Cigna's lines of business, as well as cross-enterprise experiences to drive affordability, predictability, and simplicity in healthcare. Katya, the stage is yours.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Katya Andresen, and I'm so excited to be with you all today to lead a session on a very important topic, as you just saw, vitality. Personally, vitality is incredibly important to me because I think about it as the ability to summon the strength and energy that we can bring to our purpose. And we have such a high degree of agency over that, as we're going to hear a lot about today, so that we can feel good and do more good in the world. I'm excited to introduce two guests here in a moment. I also wanted to note that we have a graphic artist here today who's going to be capturing key points, and we'll be sharing those at the end. In a few minutes, New York Times bestselling author Daniel Pink will join me on our virtual stage. But first, I'm going to introduce Dr. David Brailer, who is our first Chief Health Officer, who will set the stage for our session with some background on vitality and the Evernorth Vitality Index. Dr. Brailer joined Cigna as our first Chief Health Officer in September. In this role, he brings together the company's products, technologies, and services to create breakout health improvements for the 190 million people we serve. He's well known across the national healthcare landscape for pioneering leadership in healthcare. He is particularly in the use of health information technology. In 2011, he founded Health Evolution, which is an organization that convenes healthcare leaders as they navigate rapidly changing forces in the industry. Dr. Brailer serves as chairman of Health Evolution as well. In 2002, Dr. Brailer was appointed by President George W. Bush as a health policy advisor and later became the nation's first national coordinator for health information technology. In this role, Dr. Brailer oversaw development of the nation's strategy for electronic records, information sharing, and consumer empowerment. His efforts set the foundation for the rapid adoption of digital health technologies that is underway today. Dr. Brailer, I'm so happy that you're here at Cigna, and I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Katya. And it's such a pleasure to be working with you and your team. As you heard, I joined Cigna recently as the Chief Health Officer, and I did that because I've spent my career developing ways to improve people's health, and I've done that as a clinician, as an academic scientist, as an entrepreneur, federal policymakers you heard, and an investor. And I came to Cigna because I believe that this is the company that can be a leader in bringing health to every person we touch in a way that hasn't been done before. And, I believe that health is the foundation of all the things we want in our lives. Good health leads to happier lives, stronger communities, more capable companies, and a better future for our society. Without good health, all the other things we want, work, relationships, families, even hope, suffers. There's no better term for what all that is about other than vitality. And I want to share with you, because of that, the latest work that Cigna's been doing on vitality and the Vitality Index. And as a company, we're on a journey to learn as much as we can about vitality, how it relates to health, how it affects workforces, how it drives engagement, retention, and productivity of the workforce. Just think about what we've been through with the pandemic. In the blink of an eye, many of us had to juggle work from home, homeschooling, trying to stay safe, being healthy. People everywhere were under enormous stress. Clinicians were facing burnout from an endless stream of dying patients. We all felt lonely, and elderly people living alone were in despair. Behavioral health issues cropped up, and we're still dealing with those today. What we witnessed was more than the convergence of physical and mental health. It was the totality of the things that impact our ability to pursue life with purpose, strength, and energy. It was our vitality. So we worked with Dr. Richard Ryan, as you saw in the video, to develop the Evernorth Vitality Index. And to do that, we surveyed more than 10,000 adults across America to understand what vitality means in their daily lives. Our work confirmed some long-held beliefs and uncovered some new findings in future areas for work. We found that there's a clear relationship between a good working environment and vitality. Nearly all employed adults with high vitality are satisfied with their job. More than 60% insurance. Low levels of vitality are associated with higher absenteeism, poor work quality, higher turnover, and higher workplace dissatisfaction. Many people across the country do see real challenges to their vitality. Less than 1 in 5 U.S. adults experiences high levels of vitality. Nearly 1/4 of all Gen Z adults report low levels of vitality. This means that our future workforce is suffering and don't feel like they have the tools to be their best. People identifying as LGBTQ+ are twice as likely, 34%, to have low vitality as others. There are many, many issues and challenges around vitality. And as we seek to understand it, there are really 2 major takeaways that I think you should know and you should talk with others about. First, we know that better health is when people feel better about health, they feel better about life. When people face problems like arthritis or heart failure or diabetes, their sense of optimism and purpose, their vitality declines. On the other hand, when people are healthier, they report better vitality. We know that simply having access to good health care improves vitality. Secondly, when people feel higher vitality, their health improves. They take medications more regularly. They keep appointments with physicians. They exercise more, eat better. This is why vitality is associated with good mental and physical health and higher levels of job performance and satisfaction. We're exploring a lot more about vitality and what we can do to improve it. For example, can we target interventions like coaching or behavioral health services to people to help improve vitality? Or can we use vitality to help our workforce, our most valuable asset, improve the safety and productivity of their work? These are the questions we're dealing with, and this is just a preview of our work to come, and there'll be a lot more to come. But with that, let me turn back to Katya so she can start the fireside chat with Daniel Pink. Thanks, Katya.
Thanks so much, Dr. Brailer. Allow me the privilege to introduce our guest speaker, Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink is the author of 5 New York Times bestsellers, including his latest, which I have right here, The Power of Regret: How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. His other books include the New York Times bestsellers When and A Whole New Mind, as well as the #1 New York Times bestsellers Drive and To Sell Is Human. Dan's books have won multiple awards, have been translated into 42 languages, and have sold millions of copies around the world. He lives in Washington, D.C. with his family. Please join me in welcoming Dan Pink.
Hey, Katya, thanks for that nice welcome. I'm not at my home in Washington, D.C. I'm traveling today, and I'm in a gilded conference room in Las Vegas. So I feel a little bit like a Bond villain.
Well, this is just such a great backdrop. I'm so disappointed to hear that's not how you have your house furnished.
No, it's not.
I'm actually in a hotel room myself, less glamorous than Las Vegas, but I'm a DC native like you. And that was actually something I wanted to ask you about. I know that you started your career in political speech writing, I believe. And I'm curious, like, why you've decided to stick with our nation's capital all these years.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I like Washington. Washington is about a lot more than simply politics and government and all that. It is a big, vibrant city. It's international. There's a lot of great stuff to do. You get, to me, like, we live in a house that has a tiny little yard. So you get like an urban environment and some of the benefits of more kind of a suburban stuff. So I'm a big fan of Washington. The only thing missing in Washington is representation in Congress.
I was going to say the same thing. But otherwise, I love it too for many of the reasons that you cited. I can't tell you how excited I am to be with you here today. So excited, I think I might have stepped on my own introduction, but it's just such a thrill. Your work has really impacted my life as a leader and
Thanks.
Personally. My favorite book that I go back to over and over again on leadership is Drive. And for those of you on the line, if you haven't read that yet, it is just a fantastic book, and we're going to probably touch on some of its themes today. Certainly made me a better leader. And then your latest book, I think, may be competing with Drive for my favorite. If Drive helped me become a better leader, I think Regret is helping me become a better human being. And
well, thanks.
One of the things I note, Dan, about your work is you're very rigorous in your research. At the same time, you really focus on the human dimension and compelling storytelling. So it's not just about the quantitative, it's about the qualitative, it's about human beings. And I'm just curious, I think you are a standout in terms of combining those two elements together. And I was curious how you came to that and what it's like to put together these different books, bringing together those two ways of looking at the world.
Well, I mean, that's so nice of you to say, Katya, all those kind comments. I think that there's a natural affinity between some of the stuff that I've done and what Cigna is doing. After all, that book Drive that you mentioned talks about the work of self-determination theory, which was founded by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, who did the Vitality Index that you guys have done, which I think is a fascinating research exploration. So for me, I think those two things work together. I think that people want rigor. They want to know anytime somebody is out there making claims, you should be generously skeptical, and you should ask that person, how do you know? And so I like to show my work. I like to make sure that readers understand that what I'm saying is solidly backed up. This is one reason why for 20 years I've had a battle with my publisher, and that I like to actually put footnotes in the text itself. So people can, rather than like sort of more general endnotes, so that people can look at, I can write a sentence and it says 14, and they can go to the endnotes and see, what are you talking about with 14? And actually, in a couple of cases, readers have told me that I'm wrong. So I want that rigor, but I'm not an academic. So I want to show how this relates to people's lives. And I think that one of the things that's really important is what people want ultimately. I think what I want as a reader, as a person, is I want to have a sense of how the world works. I want to have a way to understand the world, to see the world, to make sense of it. But I also want to know what to do. Okay. And so too often I read books. It's like a big idea book. And I say, okay, well, my God, the world is changing. What should I do? What should I do? And they, well, I don't do that. Then there are other books that are like, oh, do this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, okay, how do you know, guy? And so I try to marry the two. This is one reason it takes me so long to write those books, is that that's a arduous process. But But being, hearing from readers and being at things like this make me question my life choices less. They might make me, to borrow a term, feel a greater sense of vitality.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that vitality and the part you mentioned about being able to take action on research. We've had a rough few years and a lot of talk about things like burnout. In fact, I think 89% of Americans who left their job last year cited burnout as a reason for leaving. We also heard a lot about languishing. The counter to that, of course, is vitality. But why vitality and how vitality?
Well, I mean, I actually think that the I'll give you a marker of when you talk to writers of whether they actually really like an idea. All right. Here's a little secret. All right. If they say to themselves, crap, I wish I thought of that. All right. And that's sort of how I feel with vitality. I think that vitality is really an ingenious term and an ingenious way to measure things. And I think the reason for its ingenuity is that it is multidisciplinary. Now that's kind of a antiseptic word, multidisciplinary. But our lives are less boundaried than we think. I mean, David was talking about that at the beginning, where it's like suddenly we find ourselves, we're working, we're taking care of a kid, we're dealing with homeschooling. Our lives are less bounded than that. So what is physical health? What is emotional well-being? What is enjoying your work? What is having a satisfying family life? Those things all work together. And I think that for years, we've been looking for a catch-all way to describe that. To some extent, some of the work on flourishing is like that. But I think that vitality really captures the physical health element of it too, and makes us understand how these things work together. And I think that's essential. If I am feeling physically healthy, I'm going to do better at work. But if I'm not burnt out at work, I'm going to be physically healthier. And so the causal arrows are pointing in multiple directions. And I think vitality captures that. And it's no surprise that Richard Ryan was one of the people starting it, because I think that what Ryan and Deasy have done in the last 50 years is I think that they're going to end up being in psychology textbooks and history of science textbooks for our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. I think it's that degree of influence and impact on how we see ourselves and how we see the world. And I think that vitality is a notion that strikes me as something that's going to really stick around.
I agree. And I like the way you talked about flourishing and physical health together. And in fact, as you noted, vitality is certainly connected to higher levels of health. I wanted to let our audience weigh in on some ideas on how they maintain a healthy lifestyle filled with vitality. So let's take a moment to exchange ideas in the Slido chat. And to your point, Dan, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and many approaches are very interconnected. So I look forward to seeing what people want to share here. We're going to take a look at the Slido. And as that comes up, I'm going to name some things that look interesting. Oh, here's a good one, especially for you, Dan. You're such a curious person. Susie says, learning something new. And I'm curious about being a lifelong learner and that's connection to vitality. And that's something I've heard you talk about.
Oh, I mean, I think it comes out, and that also comes out in some of the vitality research that Cigna has done. I mean, if you look at if you look at what, and it's so interesting. If you look at the older population, I think one of the surprises in the Cigna research is that people 65 and older actually have a greater sense of vitality than people who are younger. And I think that tells us something. I think it tells us something about individual agency, as you were talking about. But I think it also tells us something about systems, because the people 65 and over in America, they have health insurance. All right, they have Medicare. All right. They have, in many cases, Social Security and some degree of stability in their lives. So they might have less stress over many of the elements that sap our vitality. But one of the things that we know about vitality in older people is that it is integrally connected to learning and growing. I think that is our fundamental condition. I think that is the human condition. And I think a lot of this goes back to that. When we talk about, if you look at Ryan and DC's work, I think at some level they're saying, autonomy is the human condition. And if we look at little kids are inherently autonomous. You go out anywhere in the world and find me a 2-year-old who's not self-directed, a 4-year-old who's not self-directed. That's how we are. That is our nature. And if you look at those little kids, they are ferocious learners. And I think that our learning plateaus or stops, not because of our nature. I don't think that's the case, but because of the systems and environments that we're in. And so as leaders, if we can create situations, environments where people are learning all the time, that is going to inherently enhance their vitality. That's going to enhance their performance. And so I think that human beings are by their nature learners. One of the we want to grow, and we want to grow in some sense. And when we are in situations where we can learn and grow, we do feel a sense of vitality. When that is thwarted, either by the environment that we're in, or the choices we make, or more likely the combination of those things, then I think that leads to the sapping of vitality, whether that is a languishing or burnout, or again in your report, some of the alarming numbers on more particular measures of mental health and well-being.
Great thoughts there. And I really like some of the additional responses in here. There's gratitude, there's journal apps, there's getting outside, facing your fears, and really great responses here that certainly resonate. I want to pick up this thread of what you talked about how important it is to feel you're always growing and learning, which I think is so important to a healthy workplace. And so is a sense of connectedness. I learned a lot about that in reading your book, Drive. And I wanted to have you elaborate on self-determination theory, some of the things you touched upon at the outset of our conversation. So what fuels vitality at work?
Well, I mean, self-determination theory would tell us that it's a sense of autonomy. And autonomy is really a question of how much control do you have over what you do, when you do it, how you do it, where you do it. And a way to think about this, Katya, is this. Autonomy is an abstract term. And so one way to get our minds around, at least I try to get my mind around abstract terms, is thinking, well, what's the opposite of this? Sometimes you can get greater clarity, okay? And the opposite of autonomy is control. And that is the central thing at work. Because we know in the history of psychology before DC and Ryan that human beings have only 2 reactions to control. They comply or they defy. That's it. And in the workplace, we don't want people who are perfectly compliant, and we don't want people who are defiant. And that is our nature. As I was saying before, this is all about human nature. And so, I mean, listen, if you read the newspapers today, you see basically the history of human civilization in some part is about one group of people trying to control another group of people, and that other group of people responding with either defiance or compliance. And so on the workplace, what we want is we want people to be engaged. Right? We want people to have a sense we want people to be engaged. And the way that people are engaged is by having greater sovereignty over the core aspects of their work. So I think that that's an incredibly important takeaway from self-determination theory in establishing vitality at work.
That's wonderful. Another thing I learned in reading your book, Drive, was how important certainly autonomy is, but also feeling a sense of mastery and purpose. And I think I actually go back, your book's very dog-eared on my bookshelf, but I've gone back to it a lot over the last year or so when there's been a lot of competition for talent, a lot of focus on compensation, right, as a lever, and, can we pay enough to keep people? And a big takeaway I had from your book was, that only gets you so far. And so could you talk about some of the other dimensions of vitality in the workplace that you've explored in your work?
Yeah. So I'm glad you raised that, Katya, because let's talk about pay, because it matters. Okay. It's not like, it's not like you can offer somebody a job and compensate them in, units of vitality, come up with some kind of come up with a V coin and cryptocurrency for vitality. I mean, come on. So you have to pay people well, and you have to pay people fairly. And that's essential, all right? And I think that point about compensation goes to vitality, because one of the things that saps the vitality for certain kinds of people is that if their lives feel precarious and unstable, it's hard to feel vital if the platform on which you're standing is moving around, is wobbly. You feel like you can't pay your bills. You can't take care of your family. And so a decent and fair pay is part of what we can think of as vitality. But when it comes to performance, especially on complicated, complex tasks, and when it comes to sort of enduring notions of vitality, money is not enough. You want to pay people enough so that they're treated fairly, pay people very well so they're focused on the work rather than on the money. And that's really that's really the key. Money is largely about fairness. It matters a lot. If you don't get it right, it's over. And it's an element in our vitality because it gives us stability. But beyond that, what you want, as we were talking about, is a sense of autonomy. I diverge a little bit from DC and Ryan in what I like to call mastery. I think that mastery is a little bit different from competence, which is their parlance. And I look at some of the work of somebody like the late Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and his work on flow, but even the more contemporary work of Teresa Mabile at Harvard Business School, talking about the importance of making progress. I think that it is our nature to want to get better at stuff, to want to learn, to want to grow, to want to advance. And so mastery is part of that. And you've got to put people in situations where they are making progress, where they are seeing the progress they're making. They're getting information and relevant feedback on that progress. They have a sense of learning and growing. When they look back on their work lives, they say, wow, I used to be here and now I can do this. That's a glorious human experience. We do that in the rest of our lives, all right? This is why people play sports on the weekend. This is why people play musical instruments on the weekend. They're not getting compensated. They like the exhilaration of doing it, of getting better at something, and to the next point, of doing it together, which is you see in music and you see in sports, feeling that sense of belongingness. DC and Ryan talk about relatedness, which I think is extraordinarily important. It's about a sense of belonging, affinity with other people. I actually think that human beings are also motivated by a sense of purpose. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to make a contribution to someone in their own sort of micro world today. And when we feel that sense of purpose, we feel that vitality. What can drain vitality? Again, I'm speaking more broadly, not a thing that's research, but what can drain vitality is working and working and working and not seeing a point, working and working and working and scrambling and trying to drive forward and doing stuff and not seeing who does this affect? What's the point of the exercise? Am I helping anybody? Am I, am I solving the climate crisis? Am I reforming the U.S. healthcare system? But am I just doing something good for one person, even if it's my teammate? And I think a lot of people don't feel that sense of drift, which I think can drain that sense of wholeness, can drain that sense of vitality. And so when we pay people fairly, give them a sense of sovereignty over what they do and how they do it, allow them to make progress, put them in positions where they can learn and grow, give them ample feedback and information on how they're doing, and then put them in situations and create environments where people feel a sense of that they're making a difference, feel a sense that they're making a contribution. I think that again, it all works together. I think there's some great research, forgive me for ranting here for a moment, but I just saw this paper, it's a paper that's a few years old now, that showed that when you put people, that the difference between being in a high autonomy, that being in a job that is high autonomy, sort of high decision latitude versus low decision latitude, you can actually see differences in rates of death. I mean, and you also see differences in rates of death between jobs that are highly challenging and jobs that are not highly challenging. So what we want to do is we want to put people in jobs that are both challenging and that have decision latitude. And again, not to be the hallelujah chorus here, but I think that validates some of the work on vitality, because here you have this workplace element where we're basically talking about job design. We're talking about organizational behavior. And yet when we look at it through a different lens, the way we configure workplaces has a material effect, not simply on health and well-being in this case, but on life and death. Mm-hmm. So it all works together. And so when you think about the leaders at Cigna or any organization, what you are doing matters deeply. It matters not only in terms of do you get your project done and out the door today, but it matters in the overall physical, emotional, spiritual well-being of people you're leading.
Fantastic. And so it matters what you're doing. Another thing you've done a lot of research into, or another topic, is it matters when you do it. So in your book, When, there's all this fascinating research about how to structure your time, your days, how you think about your schedule as another really important tool, I think, for vitality. Do you think When is a tool for vitality, that particular book?
I mean, I obviously have a conflict of interest in answering that question, but yeah, I do. Because again, we have evidence here. And the evidence is in the footnotes, man. We have evidence that time of day has a material effect on our performance. There's some evidence showing that if you think about the variation between people's performance, okay, so we're gonna map. Some people are performing. We sort of rate everybody's performance, and so and we chart it like these people are over in the 100. These people are like in the 100th percentile. These people, or do it like this. These people are in the 100th percentile in performance. These people are in the first percentile, and we sort of we plot them out there. That time of day can explain something like 20% of that variance, which is incredible to me. So it does. So when we do stuff does matter. The other thing that matters extraordinarily for vitality is breaks. When I wrote that book, I did a little bit of the research on breaks. It was going to be a couple of pages long, and I started doing the research, and I was so blown away by the research. I ended up writing an entire chapter on breaks and what the science tells us about why breaks matter and how to take breaks that are more restorative, because we know that. We're not doing it necessarily, but we know that.
Yeah, I've heard you say, you used to believe, I certainly did, that, if you're really serious about something, you don't take a break, you just grind through, and that, you realize that breaks are actually for the pros. And, it's very good to take them. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because it might be counterintuitive for some of the hard driving type A folks.
Oh man. I mean, this one is not even a close call. And basically, I hate to assign blame too ferociously, but I'm going to assign blame here. It's the Puritans' fault. All right. I have no familial connection to the Puritans, believe me. And yet, nor do most Americans today. And yet we're in the grip of their way of thinking, which says that the way to get stuff done is to power through. The way to get better work done is to power through. The way to get more work done is to power through. Powering through is effective. And, boys and girls, it's morally virtuous. And that is just BS. That's not what the science tells us. The science tells us exactly what you just said, Katya, which is that amateurs are the ones who don't take breaks. Professionals take breaks. You look at research on high performers in sports or in music; they are intentional and committed break takers. And so we see all kinds of things. We see it in some healthcare settings where giving doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals breaks improves their performance. We see it in some really alarming research on standardized testing that shows that students who take standardized tests in the afternoon do poorer than students who take it in the morning, even adjusting for everything else. But that the way to remedy that is to give these kids a break before, give these kids a little snack in 20 to 30 minutes to run around on the playground before they take that test, and their scores go back up. We have gotten this so wrong. We think that breaks are a deviation from our performance, when in fact they're part of our performance. The other thing is that, and you mentioned something that I think was really interesting a moment ago. We know how to take breaks. The science tells us the kinds of effective breaks. We have a set of design principles. We know that something is better than nothing. So even a 1-minute break is better than no break at all. We know that moving is better than stationary. So breaks when you're moving around are better than when you're sedentary. Sedentariness is another sort of sapper of vitality. We know, and you mentioned this, Katya, we know that outside is better than inside. Or somebody in the slide I mentioned being outside. That is an incredibly important source of vitality that is completely under-recognized. We know that outside is better than inside. We know that for break taking, we know that social is better than solo. So this goes a little bit more to the relatedness things that you were mentioning before. We know that breaks with other people are more restorative than breaks on our own. And we also know that fully detached breaks are better than semi-detached breaks. So a break where you're looking at your phone, I'm going to go for a walk, and you're looking at your phone, that's not a break. And so when we combine these things, what it suggests, and I think that this is you know, you can add it as an addendum to the sort of to the game plan and for vitality in America, is that I truly believe that we would see increases in productivity, increases in vitality, decreases in languishing and mental health problems, measurable increase and decrease in all those things if at every workplace people took a 15-minute walk every afternoon. People took a 15-minute walk outside with someone they liked, talking about something other than work, and leaving their phone behind. That's it. That's all that it takes. I think we would see material improvements in things that in measurements that matter to us if we did that. I find the research on breaks absolutely compelling. It has changed my own behavior. It's profoundly changed my own behavior. I was someone, as you mentioned, I never took breaks. Now I'm very intentional about taking breaks. I literally put them in my calendar, so I don't, I don't let those Puritan demons scream at me saying, "Oh, you shouldn't take a break. You're being a wimp. You're not being morally virtuous."
That's really important and valuable advice. And we're going to go to Slido again to take a quick poll of folks. We're going to talk about remote work because I know that a lot of what you're saying blew up for me when I shifted to largely remote work. So, it's harder to step away from the computer sometimes. You wouldn't think it is, but it can be. It can be harder to have that connectedness. And so what is your advice if you are working from home? And we have a lot of people who it looks like the majority of folks in our poll are at home exclusively or in some kind of hybrid and home and office arrangement. Yeah,
it's great. It's a great point, Katya. I do think that it's something that we're going to be working out over the next year. We've heard about the Great Resignation. I think that 2023 is going to be the year of the great sorting. We're going to be sorting out a lot of these issues. We haven't sorted out fully what kind of work should be done together and what kind of work should be done separately. We have a very poor sense of that in organizations. What kind of work should be done synchronously? What kind of work should be done asynchronously? We don't have a good sense of what an office is for anymore. And so there's a lot of things that we need to sort out. I think that but to the people who are working at home predominantly or almost exclusively, what really matters here is being intentional. And so among the things that you can do is I'll give you a few very tactical suggestions here. Number one is that I can tell all these people, I can tell everybody here, and myself included, oh, you got to take a break, 15-minute walk break every afternoon, all right? But if I just tell you that, you ain't going to do it. Literally, put it in your calendar. Put it in your calendar. Treat it with the same sanctity with which you treat a meeting. And what happens is in our lives, especially hybrid, it's like, oh, bing, time to go to a Zoom meeting, bing, time to go to another Zoom meeting. So make it bing, bing, put that break in there. I think that's really intentional. I've actually been working at home for over 20 years. And one of the things that I've discovered here is that you want some degree of separation between your work and the rest of your life. So if you have the chance to have a room dedicated to that, to work, that's good. If you can swing that. If you just have a space or a corner devoted to that, if you have the room for that, that's really good too. Even if you're in cramped quarters, having an area, that the physical area that is a work area, and you don't let the personal stuff intrude into there at all or very often. I think that is actually really important. Some kind of soft separation between it, because then I think we lose a sense of we want some boundaries. The boundaries can be porous, but we want some boundaries. So that sort of dedicated space. The other thing I'm going to suggest to people is an idea that's been percolating out there called user manuals. I see more and more people in organizations, especially working remotely, writing user manuals for themselves. And essentially what it is, it's like a one-pager that tells your colleagues how you prefer to be treated, communicated with, connected with, and so forth. And it's super helpful. I mean, I've done this with the small team that I work with. And so I'm going to reveal some of my idiosyncrasies here. I don't love being texted because I always think that it's something urgent, and it's often not. So I don't love being texted. I prefer email to text. All right. I'm not saying that's a right or wrong. I'm saying that's me. And I tell people I work with, I'm like, okay, cool. All right. I'm going to email Dan, or I'm going to text him if it's something big, because I know he's going to respond, because he's going to jump out of his seat when he gets a text. But otherwise, I'm going to email him. Other things. I don't like Google Docs. Forgive me, Alphabet. I don't like Google Docs. I prefer Word. I actually prefer Word Perfect, but that doesn't work that well on my computer anymore. And so you tell people that, they don't say, "Oh, that's really weird. That's stupid." They say, "Oh, okay." Even things like, send me a document. I like it to be paginated. I like to have page numbers on it, because I often will print it out. And people say, "Oh, that's stupid." They say, "Oh, okay, cool." Someone else, there's a guy I worked with, Nathan. He had a period in the day where he always had to go pick up his daughter at school, and he was out of pocket. All right. And once I knew that, I'm like, okay, I don't bug Nathan between 2:45 and 4 ever. Mm-hmm. And that way I don't get frustrated if I call him at 3:15 and he doesn't answer, because I know. All right. You know what I mean? And so these kinds of things, so user manuals, scheduling breaks, dedicated space are ways that we can begin to sort of find our footing and our sense of where we are in this, what I think is going to be a permanent hybrid situation.
Those are fantastic tips. Much appreciated. I'm definitely going to use some of those. Last question, and we're going to be going to Q&A. So I'm going to ask you one last question. I absolutely loved The Power of Regret, as I said at the outset of the conversation. But I will say, Dan, I kind of was like, oh gosh, do I really want to read a book about regret? Yeah. And it ended up being this incredibly inspiring, uplifting read, which, the name didn't suggest that at first. And I love the way you reframe regret. And I think in the book, you said it makes us more human, it makes us better, and it gives you hope. And I don't know if everyone knows, but you read 16,000 regrets as part of the research here and completely reframed it. So could you give us a couple reasons we should think upon regret as a great life tool?
Okay, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think that it does. I think it does connect to. I think it does connect to vitality, but it's weird, as you say. Okay, so here's what we know: everybody has regrets. It's one of the most common emotions that human beings have. It's arguably the most most common negative emotion that human beings have. It's ubiquitous in the human experience, which is weird because it makes us feel bad. So why? Why would something that makes us feel bad be so ubiquitous? And the answer is because it's useful if we treat it right. It's useful if we treat it right. And we haven't been treating it right, because we've been sold a bill of goods saying we should always be positive and never be negative, that we should always be look forward and never look backward. Remember, vitality is not only about being positive all the time. It's about being positive a lot of the time, but it's not. Vitality and flourishing is not about being positive all the time, because negative emotions are functional if we treat it right. So what we should be doing is not ignoring our regrets, blah, 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 or wallowing in our regrets. That's even worse. We should be confronting them, using them as information, as data, as signal. And when we do that, there's a pile of evidence, once again, and it's in the footnotes, showing that it can help us become better negotiators, help us find greater meaning, help us become clearer thinkers, help us become better strategists. And so what's more, as you say, that when people tell you what they regret the most, they tell us what they value the most. And I did this giant sampling of we now have a database of over 23,000 regrets from people in 109 countries. And with remarkable similarity, people around the world seem to have the same basic regrets. And those basic regrets, I think, give us some clues about what makes a life good and vital.
That's wonderful. Well, I hope we'll get more into some of those regrets in the Q&A. I can see some questions already coming in. But before we go to that, I want to check in with our digital artist, and who is Julia Bakay. And I'm really excited to see what she's captured from our conversation here. So hopefully that's going to come up and we can take a look. Oh, wow. Look at that. Fantastic. Any comments on that, Dan?
Well, it's interesting. It's fascinating in the sense that it's almost like a video game. It's like world building there. But I think it's super cool, and I think one of the things that it shows is the connections of all of this, the connections of all of these things, and I think that's really I think that's super important here. That we are fully human. We are fully human. We do carry out roles in our lives, but at the bigger level, we aspire to be fully integrated and whole human beings. Not like, this is how I am as a parent. This is how I am as a colleague. This is how I am as a boss. This is how I am as a volunteer. Like, we want some sense of coherence among all those different kinds of selves, and how we do, in our physical health affects how we do at work. How we do at work affects how we treat our family. How we treat our family affects how we do physically, and so forth and so on. So it's just, I think that it really does a good job of capturing how integrated all this stuff is.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I'm going to move to our first question that's come in here. And it says, as a leader, how do I make my team feel empowered to take breaks and explain that it will make them better and increase their vitality? My team isn't doing it, the questioner says.
Okay. So do we have the name of the questioner?
No, it's anonymous.
No. Okay, anonymous. All right, anonymous. This is an easy one, anonymous. Here's how your team's going to take breaks. You take breaks. You model the behavior you want. You're exactly right. I think is that in any kind of organization, people look around for cues about how other people are behaving, particularly bosses are behaving. One of the things that I've seen studying organizations for 20 years is that people don't listen to what bosses say. People listen to what bosses say a lot less than bosses believe. But they watch what bosses do way more than bosses understand. So you, anonymous, need to take breaks. And my dream here, all right, here's my dream, Katya. This is my dream of how the world has changed, how the world will have changed, is that what I want someone to be, in an office looking around for the CEO saying, where's Maria? Where's Maria? Where'd she go? Where'd she go? I can't find her. And then have them say, oh no, Maria's on her regular 15-minute afternoon walk break outside. And have them say, oh my God, Maria is such a badass. All right. Like, modeling breaks is a sign of strength. Modeling breaks is a sign of what professionals and high performers do. I think that and scheduling can move the needle on this. Absolutely.
That's wonderful. There's a question people
So take a break, anonymous. When you're done with this, go take a break. If you're on the East Coast, it's almost it's almost 2:00.
Exactly. I also wanted to ask you a little bit about back to the regrets. And I noticed this came up a few times in some of the comments and questions, and you brought it up with the Puritans. So when you talk about the 4 types of regret, regrets of connection, regrets of not being bold enough. I'll let you reveal the other two, but the Pilgrims remind me of the one around, or the Puritans rather, around moral regrets. You talked about us feeling guilty about taking a break.
Yeah.
But what do we really mean by moral regrets? And could you just talk a little bit more about how it helps us to understand what exactly we are regretting and how we can take action based on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very interesting question. So just to give people some context. So as you said, there are four things that people around the world seem to regret. One is what I call a foundation regrets, which are small decisions early that add up to bad consequences later. So I didn't save enough money. I didn't take care of my health. So foundation regrets are, if only I'd done the work. Boldness regrets are, all these regrets kind of begin at a juncture. And with boldness regrets, it's like, should I take the chance or should I play it safe? Should I take the chance or should I play it safe? And overwhelmingly, when people do not take the chance, they regret it. Not all the time, but a huge portion of the time. Connection regrets are about relationships and love, not only romantic love, but but moral regrets also, like a lot of these regrets, they begin at a juncture. You're at a juncture in your life. You can do the right thing or you can do the wrong thing. And it's not really about breaks. It's not about that kind of right thing or wrong thing. It's about bigger things. So for instance, I have a lot of regrets about bullying. People who bullied somebody earlier in their life, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they still regret it. I have a lot of regrets about marital infidelity. People deeply distraught and even in some level ashamed over incidents of marital infidelity that they were willing to reveal to me on an anonymous survey that they're not willing to reveal to even their spouse. And so what does this tell us, though? I think this tells us that most of us want to be good. And I also think it tells us that most of us are good. And that when we deviate from that, whatever our moral code is, we feel bad about it. And I think it tells us that a good life, a vital life, is a life where we are good, where we are honest and true and just. And I think that when people are living a life of decency, I think that enhances their vitality too. When they're not compromising one's value is a vitality drainer. Values is a vitality drainer. And I never thought about that connection until your question. But that's what moral regrets are. The smallest category of regrets in the survey, but it's the most deeply felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question that kind of gets at connection. I currently work at home and stay in my comfort bubble. Does connecting via Zoom with coworkers count as socializing? Does it provide the same value?
Does it provide the same value? I don't think, I think it provides value. I think it provides a different kind of value. This is why I'm skeptical that we're going to go to a world where everybody is remote all the time. I just don't think that's how human beings are constituted. The challenge is that we have to think about what things do we do better when we're together. Like, what's the point of being together? And I think that, I think that there's certain kinds of collaborative things that we can do better in person rather than on Zoom. There's some evidence showing that Zoom collaboration is very good for productivity. It's good for productivity, but less good for creativity. So it could be that in person might be better for a sense of creativity. I do think that it's harder to form strong bonds via Zoom. I think it's not the same as being in person face to face a lot. I think I just don't think it's the same. And so I think that the question here really is, you can build some affinity, but I don't think you can build full affinity entirely in this mediated way. And I think the challenge for organizations is to say, all right, what's an office for? What does an office look like? And how can we entice people to the office to do the things that they can only do together? What are things like corporate offsites for? Maybe they become even more important in this world. Are there opportunities for people in organizations to go out and, not necessarily go to the office every day, but actually go out and see customers and clients and see the impact of what they're doing? And so I think these are really, really important questions. Zoom is good, but there's a ceiling on it. And if we want to, and in order to have, I think, full affinity, full belongingness, full relatedness, we need to see each other in person at least some of the time.
Well said. So here's a fun question. Someone's obviously contemplating taking to heart your advice to leave the phone at home and go for a walk, but it says, how do you turn off your mind while you're walking?
Great question. That's a really good question.
And is that the objective?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure you want to turn off your mind. I think what you want to do is you want to, if we're going to use the television set, turn it off or turn it on, I think you might want to switch channels. And this is one reason. It's such an interesting question. Mm-hmm. This is one reason why I said go out on a walk with someone you like, talking about something other than work. So talk about your family. Talk about what you're going to do on the weekend. Talk about your hobby. Talk about sports. There's a lot to be said for taking. There's an interesting trend of what are called. I can't think what it's called, but basically, one of the things that I do is that I will sometimes go on a walk, and one way to switch my mind to a certain channel is to get better. A lot of times, since I've been living in the same neighborhood for a while, I don't feel like I see everything as clearly as I could because I'm kind of on autopilot. So one technique, I can't think of what this is called, but I do it sometimes, is, okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a walk and I'm going to intentionally notice everything that is red. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you look for a particular color and suddenly you see things in a new way. Or since I live in a fairly urban area, I'm going to look for the letter G. All right. Where's the letter G? And when you do those kinds of things, it is akin to switching channels, and it's a great exercise for your thinking, and it's a great exercise for your sort of mental sharpness as well. And so that's a small thing to do to turn your mind to a different channel. Walk with somebody else and have a conversation that's not work related, or take one of these noticing walks where you pick a particular thing, a letter, a color, a number, something like that, and take that walk and look for that stuff. And it's amazing to me. Like, I will see signs and flowers and things that I never noticed in years when I do that.
That's terrific. And what a great mindfulness practice.
Yeah.
I'm going to begin to wrap us. One of the other questions was people wanted to see the digital artwork from today. They really liked that. So I wanted to let everyone know you're going to receive the digital artist's artwork from today on a bookmark, and you get a copy of this book, which you absolutely must read. I'll say my big takeaway, Dan, from the book was just the incredible regrets of inaction and not being bold enough. And I think that's a good note to end on, is the importance of that. So I want to give you a last word, a tweet length comment on that notion of being bold.
Well, what you see is that as time goes on, as people get older, they're much more likely to regret what they didn't do than what they did do. And I think the lesson is a profound lesson. It's one I try to take, which is that when in doubt, take a shot. Seriously. Take your shot. Ask that person out on a date. Try that new way of doing things. Start that business. Go on that trip. Speak up against injustice. When in doubt, take that shot, because if you don't, you might end up regretting it. If you do, I think that you remind yourself why you're here on this planet for the vanishingly short time that you are.
What a wonderful note to end on. It's just fantastic. Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, Dr. Brailer. This has been a great session. And thank you for everyone who joined us today. Take your shot and learn from your regrets. Thank you very much.